2, 1. Welcome to edition 127 of the b-boknows podcast. This is your host, Brian Bolick, and this is the NFL Draft 2022 edition. Once again, as I do with all of my NFL podcasts these days, I have Mr. Seth Burn on. How you doing today, Seth?
I'm good. Good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thanks for joining once again. I feel lucky to have you as like a, I know you've been on like one other podcast, but I feel like we always got this pretty much penned in twice or three times a year. So always nice to
for like the draft, the Super Bowl perhaps, and preseason.
Yep, indeed. So I wanted, before we get into the NFL draft, I wanted to do like a quick toast because the last time we recorded, about 6 days later, one of our fur balls ended up passing away, Mr. Tender Biddles, and you being one of the biggest cat folks that I know, you were very supportive, and I know you've kind of felt the loss too. Everyone who has a pet always feels that when they read something like that. So I wanted to do like a little toast. I don't have any liquor that I'm like very proud to drink. It's a flavored vodka. And like I was telling you before the recording here, I need to work on my liquor here. And I think you said you have tequila. What kind of tequila do you got?
Volans, Volans.
Okay. Yeah, I know you're a tequila guy. So yeah, this is to our boy here. He, if you guys want to pause this for a second to grab yourself a drink to toast, all of our pets here. Always take good care of your pets, spoil them, love them as much as you can, because you never know when they'll be gone. But here's to the lost pets here, and cheers.
Cheers.
All right, that was a necessary evil. I think the most shots I had in the past 5 years was a couple days later when I was watching the Saturday NFL games, the Bengals beating the Titans, and then the Niners beating the Packers. So that was kind of my grieving process, watching football and taking shots. So all right, well let's just go into it. And this draft is I would say quite different than last year. But before we get into the 2022 specifics, I wanted to ask you about your earliest NFL draft memories, whether it be like a trade or a pick, or comments made about a player, a great or terrible take that you might have heard. Like, I know we always see those replays ad nauseum when something like what Polian said during the draft one year, is always like one thing that gets played over and over. But what are some memories that you have, or earliest memories or best memories of the draft from your lifetime?
So I can't really pin down any best memories. I mean, I always enjoy a good surprise trade, particularly near the top of the draft. Like if Goodell comes on stage, he gets all the boos and says, "And now I will announce a trade. The Jacksonville Jaguars have traded the first overall pick." Like, he'd have the complete attention in the room. Everyone in the world wants to know what just happened, who's getting traded for. Like, so trades are awesome. But my real first memory of the draft is 1983, and I was too young to really understand some of the comments, but Marino was falling, and I had remembered him from the Sugar Bowl against Georgia, and Marino was at that point my favorite player. So I was hoping he would go to the Jets, and as it turned out, he didn't. They took Ken O'Brien, and then he fell all the way to Miami, and I remember that Miami was really good. I don't think I knew or remembered at the time they just been in the Super Bowl recently against Washington, but I knew they were good. I knew Shula was good. And so I figured, okay, good for Marino. And it turned out to be good for Marino. But yeah, that's my first memory. I didn't get any of the references in the draft later to marijuana and such. But I've rewatched the draft later, and it's an interesting rewatch. And one of the things about actually rewatching drafts years later, it's more fun than you might think, because people don't know how these players are going to turn out in the NFL. And so they make these comments, and some of them look really sharp in hindsight, and some of them are just hilarious. Like rewatching the Ryan Leaf draft is amazing.
Yeah, and like how many teams would have drafted Leaf over Manning if you're to believe everything that was said about Leaf? I mean, that's at least the impression that I got. I don't know if how true that was. I don't, because like you've been on these podcasts before where it's trying to separate the truth from bullshit is kind of hard sometimes.
So I've got a confession to make. At the time, I thought Manning had a ceiling and he wasn't winning big games. I thought he was a bit of a head case. I did not think he'd be a great pro. And Leaf, I didn't know if Leaf would be a great pro or not, but I knew he was a great athlete. And so I figured between the two of them, I'll choose the guy who has the higher ceiling. I would have taken Leaf, at least with me not having interviewed them, not having met them, not having watched the amount of film I watch these days. But just my view as a fan at the time was I don't think Manning has it, and I think Leaf might. And well, we saw how that turned out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, that was probably the most at least for me, like that, yeah, that was definitely one of the more memorable ones. I think when I was younger, I had a mixture of Niners and Bears love. Because I was still trying to figure out my like true fandom because my dad never really raised me on football, so I was kind of teetering back and forth. And I remember being excited about the Bears getting Rashawn Salam, but that was like back in the day of like not really understanding the whole value or not understanding the real value of like a running back. You're just happy to draft the name of a guy who won the Heisman Trophy.
Sure.
So and then I remember like in the days where the Niners are trying to find their next successor to Young, and they were drafting like guys like Drunken Miller. Those are names that like that's a name that like always stands out to me when I'm thinking back to old Niners drafts. But yeah, between those two, yeah, it's my earliest memories would probably be in the '90s because I didn't really watch the drafts when I was younger. Admittedly, it was probably in my teens that I really started paying attention. So, so as far as attending the draft, I know for the longest time, it was always in New York. So,
Yes.
it sounds like you actually went to a draft.
I went to it once, and I have no recollection of any NFL personnel or any team members, any GMs or anything. What I do remember is the fans. I mean, different little groups of them, and that was a lot of fun. So that part was cool. Would I go back to the draft? No, but that's because these days the draft really happens on Twitter. That's the place.
Yeah, and do you think when you experience? Well, I don't know how much you remember from your experience, but do you feel like the craziness of like some of these fans that they point out in the at the draft, like did you see mostly those type of people, or was it kind of a mix of like the crazies with like the regular people, kind of like you'd kind of like going to a game?
Much more like going to the game. A lot of people were just happy to be there.
Okay.
I don't think they were there to boo or cheer or just go crazy. I think it was just a cool experience. But I don't know. Vegas might have a different vibe.
Yeah. I was a little. There's part of me that wanted to go to the one in Chicago. Whenever that was, like 6-7 years ago. I don't remember exactly how far back that went, but for one reason or another, I didn't go. I think normally I'm not like the hugest fan of crowds, so even before COVID. So yeah. Okay, so and the one thing, last thing I wanted to talk about before the draft, I think it's the last thing before we get into the specifics, is the Dallas Minnesota trade from 1990. Now I know this is like going back many years, and this might kind of be dating ourselves, but it's the trade that defined the value of draft picks in developing a team. So, you know, do you think the trade influences or should influence the deals that GMs make to this day?
I don't think so. And there are all these draft charts, different. I mean, we've seen a lot of good high level analysis trying to figure out what draft picks are worth. And a lot of them have a much flatter slope than what we see from the trades, and certainly from the Jimmy Johnson trade chart. But when it comes down to making a trade, it comes down to a bid ask spread. And basically, the team that is calling asking for the trade is going to have to meet the asking price of the team with the pick that they want. So if you're trying to trade up, let's just say that Trevon Walker goes number 1 overall, and a team decides, you know what, we want to trade out for number 2 to get Malik Willis, and then the Detroit Lions take the call. Okay, all right, and then they call up a different team that had also talked to them before the draft. We just got a call from this team. They're offering us this. You want to beat it? You want to make the deal, or do you want to move on? And they says, yeah, no, we'll beat that. And then they make that offer, and then Lions call back the first team to call them and say, all right, well, we're going to pass unless you're going to offer us a little bit more. And you get a bidding war, and the price set lands where it lands. So, like, do these charts matter? I guess, in the sense that a lot of teams want to trade down, but if they do so at prices that are far off from historical values, they're going to get pilloried for getting fleeced. So let's just say a team wanted to trade down from the top 10.
I think I lost you there. Pause this.
Okay. And they want to trade back, and number 22 is offering trade up, and they're offering a first and a third for it. Well, historically, that'd be laughable, but they might feel like in this actual draft, well, the player we get later in the first round, plus a third round pick, plus the money we're saving between 9 and 22, yeah, that would probably be worth it for us. We'd love to do that, but we can't, because we'd have to answer to the fans, and we'd have a lot of explaining to do. So I think bid-ask spreads prevent there from being a lot more trades than teams would like to make. Let me rephrase. That's a bit of a tautology. Of course, there's bid-ask spreads that stop them, but fear of making a trade that does not line up with historical value stops trades from being made.
Sure. So the Dallas Minnesota trade with Herschel Walker, that was a big one, and then obviously I should mention the Ricky Williams one. The trade is probably the one that's freshest in my memory, because that was during my late junior high, early high school days. I don't remember the exact year, but the fact that we haven't really seen a trade like that before, I think makes me think that teams have wised up, or you're not finding like somebody who's like someone like Mike Ditka, who's like gung-ho about getting a player, just trading the whole draft.
We're not going to see that again, but let me the 49ers a few times in the last couple of years have been involved in a trade for the number 3 overall pick, either giving it up or actually I think trading into it twice, going from 2 to 3 with the Bears, and then going from, what was it, 12 to 3 or 6 to 3?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So like you can check those prices to get a sense for what the modern market is like. And I've got a meowing cat right now. She's very meowing. So, but yeah, we could look at modern trades, like trades in the last 5 years in the top 10, to get a rough sense for what prices are like these days.
And then, the part of this was the discussion. This is the first listener question. This was from Birch here, and he was asking about the Saints trade that just happened, where they had the Eagles traded the 16th, 19th overall, and then a 2022 6th round to the Saints for the 18th overall pick, 2022 3rd round, 7th round, a 2023 1st round, and 2024 2nd round. And it was, people were kind of curious about that trade. And when you saw that kind of trade, what were your initial thoughts?
My initial thought was it was step one of a multi-trade process. My thought at the time was, okay, they want to be ready on draft night if, say, Malik Willis is falling and they think they can catch a falling star, catch a falling quarterback. That was my read at the time. Now, I don't actually know what they're thinking. For all I know, their trades are done. For all I know, they just wanted an extra first round pick going next year in the 16 to 20 range, and now they have one. But my guess is they're going to be active on Thursday night. So we'll see. Also, just one thing on price. Yes, I felt like the price they paid was a bit steep. But if it does somehow end up with them getting Malik Willis, I mean, they could be heroes or it could be another disaster. So
yeah. So when you see a trade like this made, do you feel pretty confident that it was the Saints reaching out to the Eagles?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, because I feel like you could probably look at most trades and probably kind of figure that out. Is my guess. Maybe
As
not all the time.
Rule, the team that moves up made the telephone call.
Yeah. Okay. So there's one last question for the 2022 draft. We always hear the cliche of drafting for need versus drafting best available, and I don't really know how, the best way to define that, if people are just kind of just trying to fill air, talking out of their ass. But have you ever studied whether one approach has worked better for teams?
In general, the accepted right philosophy is draft the best players available. And I want to note this takes positional value into account. You're not drafting the best punter available.
Sure.
Except maybe this year, which we'll get to a little bit later. But yeah, if you're constantly drafting for need, then you'll find yourself reaching if there's not a player at that position, at that value where you're picking available. And that could be a problem. We see that with wide receivers every once in a while. After there's been a run on wide receivers, we'd still plan on driving a wide receiver, so we're going to take the next wide receiver, even if he wasn't normally expected to go for another 8 or so picks.
Sure.
That can be a problem. So generally, you want to draft for value, draft for need in rare circumstances. Now, we see teams trade up for need when it comes to quarterbacks, and that's just how it is.
Yeah, and that goes back to your whole positional value thing. Because that quarterback in particular could be the 18th overall player on your sheet, but he'll have a much bigger impact than probably most of the people in the front part of that aren't quarterbacks. Maybe not all of them, but a lot of them, they'll the 18th best player that's a quarterback will have a bigger impact than maybe the 14th best player that's an offensive tackle. I'm just kind of pulling random positions out of my ass.
But your example works. If you're taking the 14th overall pick, the 14th overall player, he's an offensive tackle and he hits and he turns out great. Well, phenomenal. You've gotten a left tackle that's a lot of value. But if someone takes the 18th overall quarterback and they hit, 2 years later, if you call them asking up, hey, do you want to swap players? They're going to tell you to go fuck yourself.
Yeah. So I guess pulling that out of my ass wasn't the worst example there. So, okay. All right. So let's go into the 2022 draft. So I mentioned this in our pre-recording here that part of my interest in last year's draft was Niners related because they were the 3rd overall pick. Another part was just because there were so many damn quarterbacks. So that adds some intrigue to the draft and like trying to figure out like, how the dominoes are going to fall. And the whole Mac Jones thing was great content for last year, but for this year, it seems to be a lot more, at least using your rankings, a lot more, not necessarily skill players, but like offensive linemen, secondaries. So,
Yeah.
but in terms of the draft process itself, did you make any major adjustments to your draft evaluation process between last year and this year? And if so, like what were some of the criteria that you updated?
So one of the things I might be updating more in the future is age.
Okay.
I've been thinking more about that, and I want to actually run tests to figure out if I can quantify the value of it.
Okay.
And then if I can, then it's something that I can fairly easily add. Otherwise, let's see. Arm length is another thing I've been adding for offensive linemen in particular, because it clearly has mattered more. It's either mattered more lately than it has in the past, or I've noticed it mattering more lately than it has in the past. But either way, I was underweighting it before, and hopefully I fixed that. So arm length, that's the big one. I've changed made it recently. And a year or two ago, with Jamin Davis out of Kentucky to Washington, I've decided to reevaluate how much speed matters in off-ball linebackers.
Okay. Now, when you were discussing the arm length part, is that specific to a set of positions that you are like that you worry about? Or is
in
that
this particular case, it's I've been focusing on offensive linemen, but it clearly also matters to defensive linemen, because it's a question of who makes first contact on after the snap. So the ball is snapped, the offensive lineman and the defensive end are competing, and if the defensive end gets his hands on the offensive lineman first, he can get a push, move off to the side, and try to either attack him inside or push him inside and sweep around the edge. Or if the offensive lineman gets his hands on him first, you can knock him back and basically neutralize him right off the snap. So that's one of the reasons arm length matters.
Okay. All right. And as I mentioned at the start of this particular area of the pod, your rankings last year, I went through your top 10, and last year's top 10 had 6 total quarterbacks, a wide receiver, and a tight end versus none this year. And then this year, there was 8 combined offensive linemen and secondary players in this year's draft. So, what do you make of that? Is it just one of those fluky things? That
it's not.
Year to year?
I assure you, I've not changed my positional weights that much between the various positions.
Sure.
So no, it's more a matter of, well, that's what we got this year. This year we have a fair amount of edge rushing talent. We've got a lot of secondary talent in the defensive backfield, and we've got offensive linemen. This is not the worst in the world. These are positions that teams care about, but it's not what they need most. And what they need most is quarterbacks. So, I mean, if you can accurately evaluate Pickett, Willis, or possibly even Howell, and you say, no, this is a guy who we can win with, and you get him, like that's how GMs get paid and make their legacies.
Yeah, and maybe in a year where the talent is low, if you like you said, if you do nail that one guy out of the group that actually does hit, like let's just say there's one guy, I don't know, there could be multiple guys, but let's just say one guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it'll probably matter, it might matter more than with all the players that were drafted last year. I mean, none of them really made an impact. So I don't know. I get, also depends on who drafts them, but that obviously goes without saying.
Now, if my memory is correct, Tua went 5, Herbert went 6.
Oh yeah, in 2020.
Yeah,
yeah, that sounds
How
right.
much do you think the Dolphins would want to flip that?
Yeah,
if you get a quarterback right, it's a big game.
Yeah, and the whole thing, even before Tua got hurt, I remember that was like tank for Tua, and then he got hurt, and then Miami ended up getting him with their second pick of that draft, I think. But yeah, I think I think they would take that back.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of like the fact that there's the lack of skill players, the ones who move the needle offensively, how does that influence the draft in terms of trades? Are you anticipating more trades perhaps, or less trades, or what are you thinking?
Well, I think we've seen less trades at this point heading to the draft than we saw last year. I'm not positive this is, but that's just what I think. Now, in terms of what I'm actually expecting on draft night, I'm actually expecting to be a really fun draft because this is a year where I don't think, well, there isn't a consensus accepted number one because insofar as there it was Hutchinson. And right now he's the underdog to go first. So there you go.
Yeah.
And just all throughout the top 10 and top 15 and so on, I think we don't know, or we don't know who to even expect to get picked in a lot of spots. So I think that makes it a lot more exciting than normal. And I do expect teams to, if Willis falls, make an effort to go get him. I think he's the guy that they want.
Yeah, and reading like some of the commentary about him, or I guess maybe some of the pre-draft stuff, the few things that I have read, it would be interesting to see him fall to like a team that already has like a guy that's like on their rookie deal. Like I think the ones that I've heard are the Giants and like the Eagles.
The Giants going to get first crack. Like,
yeah, and they obviously they're obviously in that position where they, if they really wanted them, they can get them.
Yep.
But it's a matter of, well, and we'll get into that later because I'll be curious to hear about your thoughts about the new regime in New York, because it does seem a lot more optimistic, at least the things that I'm reading about them.
Competence feels great once you've had incompetence for years.
Yeah. So we'll see about the trades. But in terms of the rankings, when you see like when you're doing these rankings like year to year, and you see it leaning towards like heavily towards a position or two, kind of maybe like this year where you see like all the secondary and offensive linemen, do you ever start to question why that's the case, and perhaps and find like evaluation points that you might need to adjust? Or is it kind of going back to what we were talking about before, and just kind of like it is what it is, it's just kind of what it is this year, and then kind of just move on from that point?
So in the case of the offensive tackles, like I have no concerns about that whatsoever. I value them pretty high. I graded these guys that as if they were 3 elite offensive tackle talents, and I expect them to go early. That's fine. The question is interior offensive linemen. So there's a center and a guard that I have in the top 10, and neither of them are drafted anywhere near that. And I accept this. I mean, in the same way that I have a safety first overall, I accept that the positional value isn't what it is for other positions. And right now, these grades are against other players playing the same position. It's how good you are at what you do, with the exception of the punter Matarese. Like, yes, in theory, I could have given him a top 10 grade because he's an awesome punter compared to other punters, but that's just not how my grading system works. And I don't really know how I would change it to make punters. Well, I certainly wouldn't want 3 or 4 punters to show up in my top 100.
Yeah.
So in that case, positional value has already been applied.
Okay.
But in terms of the center Lindebaum and the guard Green, no, I really do think these guys are great. Lindebaum has one issue in that he's a bit undersized, which means he'll work in some offensive systems, but not in others. And he'll fall a bit, but so long as he goes to a team where he'll fit in the system, I think he's going to be great. So yeah, I have no regrets giving him the grade I've given him. In terms of guards, I just haven't given out that many first round grades to guards. There's 2 this year, and one certainly will go in the first round. The other one might. But so far, the guards we've seen taken in the first round the last couple of years have done quite well in the NFL. So I don't really feel much of a need to make more adjustments there either. I understand why I'm rating them more highly than, say, you're going to find on most draft boards or the big boards, but I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. Now to somebody who doesn't like, I'm familiar with offensive lines, but like in terms of the value of each position, left tackle, right tackle, left guard, right guard, center. Like when you're talking about guards, are you talking like, not that there's like a least important part of the line, but like, would the guards be kind of like, the running backs of the offensive line, where it's like maybe not, where you obviously people want to draft. It seems like you want your anchor to be like, if you got a right-handed quarterback, you want it to be left tackle. If you got a left-handed quarterback, probably right tackle, I'm guessing. But in terms of guards, like, are you like, is there like positional weights within the offensive line itself that you give like maybe tackles a little higher of a bump than like?
No doubt that tackles, and particularly left tackles, are the moneymakers in the offensive line. If you were to give points in terms of how good your various offensive linemen are, your left tackle would get more points than any other position on the line. The key thing here is actually centers. Centers are a position where athleticism, the thing that actually makes Tyler Linderbaum so great, it's less important to the position in some cases. There are various offensive systems that you can run where you could have a center who doesn't have to be a great athlete, which opens up the number of people you can draft there. And doing so means it's a much cheaper position for you to fill. So left tackles, no, they need to be really good at what they do. Centers, they could be 8, and that makes it, again, cheaper, which is the other thing that is going to hurt Linderbaum's draft stock.
Okay.
And as for guards, I mean, guards matter. There just are so few elite talented guards. The ones that we've seen lately have done really well. Hopefully that proves the case with Vera Tucker in New York and with Green this year. Obviously, we're going to have to wait and see, but guards matter. There's not as much as tackles.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, just kind of a random thing I just thought about there, but okay, so we touched base on the rankings of positions. So towards the end of last year, especially the last week, we saw the top 2 teams actually win their last games, which was kind of a fascinating phenomenon, especially since it influenced the playoffs in one case with the Jaguars beating the Colts. So do you think that like the bad teams that in 2021 picked a bad year to be bad, but just on the sole basis of there not being the top end quarterback talent? Like, I mean, I know you can't choose to be, I guess you can choose to be bad, but do you think that it was a bad year to be bad?
All right. First of all, the Jaguars did choose to be bad last year, and they were better at the Jets, so fuck them. So they're at number 1 this year as well, and there's no elite quarterback for them to trade away and get a huge bunch of picks. No tears for them. I don't care. I'll be, apart from the fact that it'll cost me money, I'll be amused if they take Trevon Walker first overall. Good luck with that. So that's my thoughts on the Jaguars. Now, in terms of the Lions, I feel a little more sympathy for them because, first of all, they were trying hard all year. I like their coach a lot. He got the team going hard week after week. It didn't work out for them a lot of times. But hell, if they had more talent, like they could be a problem. I at least like the effort and intensity we saw from them. And honestly, I hope they have a great draft. I I hope they're competitive in the future. It's been a long time. They made one NFC championship game since the merger. It's been 50 years. No Super Bowls, one championship game.
Yeah.
That's awful.
And they've forced out, and they've forced two generational talents to retire in their prime.
Yeah.
Which, is like, how do you manage that? Like they chose to retire rather than continue to play football with the Lions.
That's very depressing.
And I hear some kitties in the background there. We got
yeah. So I have a feral female right now here.
Okay.
She wants attention. Yep. And now I'm giving her attention. She's even louder. You're a kitty. Yes, you are.
Yeah. Panther's taking up my vision here, so I'm trying to look around here to look at the next part of the outline here. So, the one thing that caught my eye in terms of the early part of the draft is that your city, or I guess city. I mean, although they play their games in New Jersey, but the Giants and Jets have 2 picks each in the top 10. So maybe this is a question that would have been a whole lot different last year than this year. I'm sure it seems like you might have more faith this year, at least in the Giants part of the equation, and maybe not screwing things up, maybe compared to last year. But how can they screw it up, or how can either one of them or both of them screw up these top 10 picks, like having 2 each?
So the way you screw up a draft is by reaching. That's the easiest way to screw up a draft. You fall in love with the guy, you take him far earlier than anyone should, and he doesn't pan out, certainly not to the level that you were hoping or expecting. That's how you hurt yourself in the draft. That's the thing that Seahawks have been doing far too often lately. And also the Raiders. But in terms of specifically, I don't know. I don't know who specifically they might reach for. I mean, I'm sure that if the Giants were to take Kenny Pickett 5th overall or even 7th overall, there'd be some reactions. But you know what? I'm going to trust the process. It will be very hard for me to be particularly upset with anything either team does.
Okay. Now, I guess I should know this. I think at the end of the day, when both of the teams face each other, you would choose Jets. Yeah, because I feel like that's the team you have the most passion about. But because when we're talking about Chicago team, like New York has divisions in like every sport. Like the only sport that we have to worry about divisions here in Chicago area is baseball. But even then, like the people get into it. But for me, I if the Cubs win, that's great. But obviously, if they're playing the Sox, then go Sox. But yeah, I had to make sure that I cleared that up because I was pretty sure that you were Jets.
I am Jets, Mets, Knicks, Rangers.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the first round, because that's the money round, are you expecting anyone to move into the first round that's currently not there? Maybe for like one of the quarterbacks, because I know that that was kind of like the last, or however many years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, with Lamar Jackson. I feel like that was like the Ravens kind of snuck in there and made that surprise. I don't remember if they already had a first round pick that year, but they kind of snuck in there, took Lamar, and the whole like I mentioned here in the outline here about the the 5th year option with these picks in the first round. So like, do you have like a feel, like I'm not asking you to prognosticate, but do you have a feel of like teams that you think might be in that position?
So it's tough for me to know what teams are going to do what late in the first round. Like, I don't know which teams like Howell, like Ritter, there's Desmond Ritter, Oh, Coral. Now, Coral. I don't know which teams like the 3 through 5 quarterbacks, the ones who might go late in the first round. But the thing you just mentioned, that fifth year option, it is much better to take a quarterback 32nd overall than take him 33rd overall. And the reason is that fifth year option. So let's say you had the 33rd pick in the draft. And you want a quarterback. It's worth talking to the guys at 30, 31, 32. Hey, I know this guy will be there when I'm picking tomorrow, but I prefer to grab him today. How much is it going to cost me? And that's something you're going to have to weigh, the price to move up versus the value of that fifth year option. But with the fifth year option, it makes sense for quarterbacks to go late in the first. If you hit, it's a lot cheaper to keep them longer.
Okay, so not necessarily making a prediction on like a team, but you're thinking that
it's hard to know which teams are going to do what.
Yeah. So, but you're thinking that like they're given the skill level and maybe like where you have these particular players ranked, where it's just kind of like, they're not like necessarily they maybe a potential franchise, but none that stick out kind of like last year where it was kind of clear that we were going to have a quarterback top heavy draft.
Sure.
Where where you might find some value at the bottom half, and like, so with the second round pick, I don't remember how the contract goes. So there's no like you said, there's no fifth year option, but like, is there like, are they weighted into salaries too at that point? I think they are, right? Like,
yeah. But the salary isn't really the major issue. Yes, you're saving salary.
It's that extra year.
But the year is what matters.
Yeah.
It's the option.
Yeah. Because the thing that I realized, especially in the past 20 years, like the more I've like paid attention to football, is realizing how valuable it is to try to win in that window when you got that quarterback who's good and he's on that rookie deal.
Let's actually not talk about the teams trading up. Let's talk about the teams that could trade back. So we have the Chiefs with the 29th and 30th picks,
okay,
which is hilarious to me. And then we have the Bengals at 31, the Lions at 32. Any of those teams might take a phone call from a team looking to trade up for QB3.
Sure.
And I'm sure all of them would be happy to make a deal, because I don't think any of them are going to be looking to take a quarterback at that point. The Lions, perhaps, maybe they're going to say, you know what, we're going to take a quarterback at number 32. But I don't think the Chiefs or Bengals were going to go in that direction.
Sure.
So they might get calls.
Okay. All right. And last year, one of our biggest discussions, especially from a betting perspective, was Mac Jones, and that was I felt very validated about our recording, whatever it was, a day or two later, when Mac fell to the Patriots, whatever it was, at 12, 14, 15, I remember. But I don't feel like we have that kind of like a discussion point for this year, but like, do you have any strong betting stances? Maybe not.
I didn't until today.
Okay.
But today, Circa, our boys, came up with their 1K limit draft positions.
Okay.
And they posted, and you can find it in the tweet, but when I first saw it, Walker over 1.5 was plus 225. Hutchinson under 1.5 was plus 150. Those lines have moved now down a bit. Hutch went from 250 to 240 to 210. Walker went from 225 to 175 to 160 to 150. In terms of the plus signs on the opposite directions, betting effectively that Hutch will go number one. I don't believe in Walker. Now, I'm probably gonna be wrong. I accept that, but as an underdog, I'll take Hutch over Walker. God, I really should call him by his actual name, Hutchinson. Because watching Hutchinson, he was a better football player than Walker was last year. He just was. He got more sacks, he got more pressure, he did more damage, he got more offensive attention. He was the guy teams were scheming against. And it's not like he had a bad combine, he had a very good combine. He just didn't have a super freak combine, which is what Walker had. And Walker rose up in boards. You have an edge who, in a year with no quarterbacks, the best thing you could do is grab an edge. You have a guy who is a super freak. So this guy could be amazing. And if you're Jacksonville, all right, what are you going to do? No one's calling us up to trade for the pick. So, yeah, let's take the best athlete available at a high value position, a guy who's really good, who comes from Georgia. Like, they're the national champions. Are we really going to get a better pedigree than that? And I guess I can see the logic, but I'm not taking Walker. So I'm going to gamble, and I'm literally gambling, that they won't take Walker either.
Okay.
We'll see in a few days.
Okay. And then you have some comments here about, well, I guess you had some questions about the Giants here that you wanted to discuss.
All right. So I believe we're talking about the general managers. The switch from Gettleman to Schoen. And I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I'm probably not. And I hope I'm pronouncing Gettleman's name incorrectly, but I'm probably getting it right.
Well, all I know is there's multiple L's in Gettleman's name, so that's kind of, or no, there should be multiple L's in Gettleman's name. But
now. All right. So, in the case of Gettleman, in his defense, and this is the only defense I'm going to make for him, he was trying to win, and he thought he was doing so. When he drafted Jones, he thought he was getting the next Manning brother. He thought he was getting a tall guy who was trained by the same people who, he went to Duke. He was a smart guy. We think he has all the tools to succeed in the NFL. We think we found our man. They thought they did. When they're taking Saquon Barkley, he thought, I'm going to take an absolutely awesome running back. Like, I graded Barkley very highly. He was really good at being a running back. Unfortunately, he was still a running back. And so the Giants figured, okay, we're going to get Barkley. Our running game is going to improve. We have our quarterback. We have our running back. We're on our way to building a real offense, which is one of the ways you win in the NFL. And while everyone was yelling at him at the time, he at least had a coherent plan that he was following that thought was going to work. Now, it didn't work. We warned him. We told him that it wasn't going to work. We told him why it wasn't going to work. But in any event, his heart was in the right place, even if he was an idiot and an asshole. Now we have Schoen come in, and Schoen is competent. He also wants to win, but he actually has a good idea of positional value and how to evaluate players. And now the Giants should be in much better shape in the long run. One fly in the ointment is that the Giants have part of the Mara family tree in the general manager's, not office per se, but in the room. They have people who have studied scouting who want to be GM for the family business. And that's a problem to me. Having ownership meddle, even indirectly, into the general manager's job doesn't end well. It hasn't ended well with Dolan and the Knicks, and I don't think it'll end well with the Giants. But having said that, this is a huge step up in GM, and I'm expecting much better things from the draft going forward.
Okay. And then you mentioned something about the Jets here as well in this.
Let's go to
here.
the videotape. Let's see.
Towards the top of the fourth page here.
All right.
That you're mentioning about Thibodeau.
All right. So we're discussing like what I'm hoping for the Jets and things can go wrong. And right now, our boy Circa is telling me that Thibodeau is going to be available at number 4. And if he is, I'm going to be very, very happy. And I'll be even happier if the Jets take him. Like, I would very much like to see Thibodeau end up wearing green.
Okay. Okay. And then you had brought this up to me in our Google chat here, that a note that you wanted to bring up from, and I, give me my chance to butcher a name here, but like I like to do, but Thor Nystrom.
I've actually never heard it pronounced, so let's say we get it right.
Yeah, that looks right, I think. So
Yeah.
you had made a comment, and I hadn't read this myself, that he was making a case for Malik Willis at number 2. Now that would, that would have, like, in terms of anyone who likes chaos, that would certainly bring some chaos and some discussion to the draft, or some more interest to the draft, just because people love to have these surprises happen. So, what were
quarterback surprise?
So yeah, so when you brought that up to me yesterday, like, yeah, what are some things you wanted to discuss about that particular thought?
So Thor's view is that Malik Willis is effectively a right-handed Michael Vick. He ran a 4.37 back in 2018 when he was at Alabama, 4.37 40. And his arm is a cannon. There's no question he's got the strongest arm in the draft, and one of the strongest arms we've seen in years. So you have a guy who's got a gun with great legs, you can build off that. Now, he talked about how back in 2020, when his teammates were better, he had them help them win a lot of games where they were underdogs, gave them a great record. And then his quality of his teammates decreased quite a bit. A lot of players left. And this year, he was forced to make chicken salad out of substandard chicken parts. And it's not necessarily his fault that he couldn't do so. Now, Thor makes a coherent argument. You know what? I'll even link to this. I'll send you the link so you can put it up underneath the podcast, just so you can know what we're talking about here.
Okay.
So that's Thor's view, and I get it. There is the possibility that Willis is going to be awesome one day. I agree on his potential upside. The problem is Willis did not elevate his teammates. Yes, his teammates were worse this year, but he was more experienced. And if he's the best player on the field, if he's a guy who could be a transcendent NFL quarterback, then he really should be able to help Liberty do a lot better than they did this year. He completed 61% of his passes. He completed 64% of them last year. Let me go get those other numbers because I want to have them handy. Like comparing him to Vic was able to take his team, Virginia Tech, to the, I guess it was the BCS championship game at the time. They lost to Florida State, but like he was awesome in college. Willis was not awesome in college. He's got a high ceiling, a low floor. So yeah, the accuracy thing is the big deal. And we've seen Josh Allen become more accurate in the pros. One of the things I put in my write-ups was Willis was in the 17th percentile in terms of expected points added his final year. And I posted a link to the list that someone else had put together, and it was a terrible list. The guy who actually was the top of the list was Daniel Jones. So the best that you're hoping for if you're on that list is Daniel Jones. And that's, you don't take Daniel Jones 2 overall. You don't even take him 6 overall. So that's the Willis thing. Like there's the meme. Does it ever work for those people? No, it never does. But it could work for us. So if the Detroit Lions want to be that guy from Arrested Development, it could work for us. Well, then must see television. I'd watch.
No, like we discussed before, like last year, I remember discussing with the whole Mac Jones stuff. Like when we were discussing, I remember discussing the Niners with you last year when Mac Jones was being thrown out as the number 3 pick. Now, picking Mac Jones at number 3 is a lot different. It was actually the 12th pick that they traded, I remember last year. So because I remember like it was like 9 picks, I think. So like picking Mac Jones at 12 would have been a lot different than picking Mac Jones at 3. So like the Lions having what you said, the 32nd pick of the draft.
Yeah,
not to say like given how quarterbacks go, like I'd be surprised if he did go in that spot. Like that's obviously a point where you would say like, sure, the Lions picking him number 2, that would be kind of stupid, but picking him 32nd now, that's kind of way better. Like, kind of using that whole Mac Jones thing from last year, I guess, is kind of what I was thinking there.
So I don't think it's realistic for Willis to be available at 32 or even
Okay.
Pickett to be available at 32. I mean, obviously, it'd be awesome if it was for them. That'd be great. But just let's talk about a hypothetical. I mean, the Lions, if they so wanted to, they have the draft capital to trade up to like 10. If Willis falls 10 and they say, all right, now's the time, they have the tools to go get him.
Sure.
So, yes, two would be. I'm going to go with ballsy. And I don't want to say stupid. I want to say ballsy. It would be ballsy for them to
Yeah,
take him back.
I mean, because you're talking about a quarterback. It's not like you're trading up. It's not like you're drafting a running back number 2. When you're drafting a quarterback number 2, if he's a first round talent, but he's like bottom first round talent, you could say like, oh, that's kind of a reach. But again, the positional value, if you hit on it, then then you're a genius. But yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I had to mention that whole. I just remember the whole Mac Jones discussion last year because
Sure.
it would have been a lot different if the Niners stayed in their spot and drafted him. I would have been a lot more okay with that than like if they would have drafted him number 3 last year. Guess what I'm getting at? I
That's
think
fair.
kind of stressed that out pretty well. So, okay, so you had some player snippets here that I think you wanted to touch base on.
Like, these are the guys who are going to be interesting in the first round. The guys we're going to talk about quite a bit. So we've already talked about Willis. So I'm going to start with Pickett. Don't sweat the small hands. He does have small hands. As a matter of fact, his hands are the same size as Michael Vick. So it's the second time we've talked about a quarterback in Michael Vick. Sweat the fact that he turns, I think he turns 24 in June, and he does not have a rocket arm. So despite that, he is still my number 1 quarterback. I think the growth he showed last year is real. And so he did the Joe Burrow thing. He had one great year when he was overaged, and now he's heading to the NFL. Now, of course, his year was not as great as Joe Burrow's was. He's not as good as Joe Burrow. He's still this man is Joe Burrow, which for this year is my number 1 quarterback. And then there's Desmond Ridder. He might sneak into the first round. He's inaccurate without Willis's upside, so I would avoid Ridder. Matt Corral, I mean, my view is he's fine. He's meh. He's my QB4. And then there's Sam Howell. He was actually the highest rated quarterback heading into this year after having 2 really good years in North Carolina. And this year he stank. He fell to earth. But the tape from previous to this year was actually really good. So he's my quarterback 3. If I was going to like make a move late in the first round to grab to quarterback, it'd be him. No point in talking about running backs. They don't matter. Evan Neal, he's my number 1 offensive tackle. He'd be my first of them off the board after the edges. I like him a lot. And then there's Ekwonu. I don't think he's as good as Neal, even though he's probably going to go ahead of him. I don't know way of knowing for certain, but he's very good. I just don't think he's as good as Neal. And then there's Charles Cross, who I think is roughly on the same level as Ekwonu. So he's been flying up draft boards, which I think is fair. He's really, really good. So 3 really strong offensive tackles. Neal's my favorite. Kenyon Green, he's the guard we talked about earlier. I like him a lot. I like him more. He's going to go later than I would take him. So, like, he's going to be value, I think, wherever he goes. Then we talked about Tyler Lindemann in the center. Again, he's undersized, but really, really, really good. If he's going to work in your system, I think you should grab him if you need a center. Wide receivers, my number 1 wide receiver was Jameson Williams, and actually by quite a margin, but he got hurt and tore his ACL, I believe. And so we're going to have to see. We've seen him do some athletic stuff after the surgery, but we haven't seen him make the kind of cuts that he made on the field. And that's the quick question. Will his agility come back? And if he can still run the same routes, if he still make the same cuts, then yeah, he's going to be awesome. But we don't know that right now. So he's an injury red flag. Still really good, really high upside. Garrett Wilson. So one of the things lately, if you look at wide receivers taken in the first round or first couple rounds that are below 190 pounds, for the most part, they have not worked out. They have not lived up to the draft status. And so he's one of the small guys who, yeah, he was really good in college and he might be a great slot wide receiver, but how early do you want to take a slot wide receiver? And how sure that he's going to be able to play at the same level in the pros? So, like, I hope he does not end up in New York. No offense, dude. Sorry. Drake London is my post Jameson Williams #1 wide receiver. I mean, if you watch this film, he's just smooth. He's big, he's fast, and he plays fast on the field. He didn't run his 40 so he didn't run it at the combine because he was recovering from injury, fine, whatever. He pushed back his pro day to April 15th, and we all figured, okay, so you're going to wait till you're healthy enough to run the 40. We're all psyched for it. And then once the 15th came around, he did not run the 40 there either, which raised some eyebrows. Is it a matter of, well, he just felt like he hasn't fully recovered from the injury, or he hasn't regained all his speed post-injury? No one really knows. It's just something that people wonder about, but I don't think it'll hurt his draft stock too much. He's, again, my #1 wide receiver. Traylon Burks, he's the whammy in the draft. I'm already offering my condolences to whatever team takes him in the first round. I hope he ends up in New England. Chris Olave, whatever. He's another one of those sub 190 guys. So buyer beware. Same with Jahan Dotson. He is small, SMOL. Then there's George Pickens. Pickens has great film. But the problem is most of it comes before his injury. Now, he came back from the injury, and since then, I think he had 5 catches in 4 games, which is a little disconcerting. He was a potential monster pre-injury. If he doesn't have the same agility now than he did beforehand, that would be unfortunate. So that probably knocks him to the second round. One of those big risk reward. If he returns to his form 100%, huge value. If he doesn't, well, he might not be able to make it in the NFL. All right, now let's go to the cornerbacks. Sauce Gardner, I love him. He's my #1 cornerback. He's probably the first cornerback off the board, and certainly would be mine. Derek Stingley, I like him a lot, not as much as Sauce. He's got a bit of an injury red flag, but he's still my #2 cornerback. Andrew Booth, he was also, I believe, in my top 10. He's not quite on the same level as the top 2 guys, and he has an injury red flag, but he's still my cornerback #3. Pretty good. All right, now my #1 rated player, Kyle Hamilton. It's always a little sad when your #1 rated player is a safety or a running back. Like that's just not what you're hoping for. So 2 things for him. First, positional value. He's a safety. Second, he's not a super freak. And so in the top 10, do you really want to take a safety who doesn't just blow people away with his athleticism? Maybe not, but I'd be happy if he went to the Jets at #10 because he has the highest floor in the draft as far as I can tell. He's a really good football player. I mean, his numbers in Notre Dame were great. I think he can play. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on Hamilton. Come to off-ball linebackers. My #1 graded was Nakobe Dean. He's fine. Okay, you take him late in the first round. My #2 rated off-ball linebacker was Devin Lloyd. He's amazing. Wherever he goes, congratulations to his new team. He's going to be great. I love him. Aiden Hutchinson. All right, he's the guy who I would take first overall because he's an edge who I trust to succeed in the NFL. He's a very good athlete. Super freak, no, but very good athlete with no real flaws or red flags. Maybe he's the meatloaf of selections. Like he's really good. Nothing to complain about.
Yeah, Sizzle would be okay with that. Meatloaf.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And then there's Kayvon Thibodeau. He's the guy who I hope goes to the Jets #4, which is kind of the highest praise I can really give. Like when the Jets have the #4 overall pick, if you're the guy who I end up they get, I like you a lot. Then there's Travon Walker. He is the super freak. He had 6 sacks last season with my 13th overall graded player. My #3 defensive end. Like, let's put it this way. He's probably going first, and I'd much rather with the Jets get Thibodeau 4th than him. those are my thoughts.
Okay.
Then there's a couple other edge rushers who I think are really, really good in the top 15 or top 20, like Jermaine Johnson, George Karlaftis. Like Karlaftis apparently has been falling on the draft boards, but if you watched him at Purdue, so there's something called the 2.0 barrier, and that's the amount of blockers you face per play. And it's theoretical. No one really faces more than like double blocking on a play, but he came pretty close because he was regularly facing double teams because the rest of the Purdue pass rush was pretty lousy. So like stop this guy and you'll be okay. And then after the double team, there was often like a running back there waiting to chip him just in case. So that's what I mean by like facing 3 blockers to get to the quarterback. And he still put up decent numbers. Like he's really, really good. I would take him the top 20. Like, so that's 5 pass rushers I really like in the first round. Teams need pass rushers. They're there in the draft. And then there's a guy by the name of Nick Benito. I believe he's like 59th on Arif Hassan's big board. I don't know if he's expected to go in the first round, but I think he's a first round value. I think he's just great. A great athlete. He might just be a designated pass rusher, but if that's your role, then he's a really, really, really good designated pass rusher. There's going to be a lot of third downs in the game when you know they're probably going to pass. You set him in, you put him in for those 20, 25, 30 plays, just have him pin his ears back and go. I like him. So those are my thoughts. Oh, and let's talk about the possibly single best player in the draft.
Oh, the punter.
Matt Ariza. So I actually did a little research today on draft punting history. So there's this guy, Brian Anger, taken by the Jaguars. He went 70th or 75th or whatever it was, but the joke on him was he went before Russell Wilson, which is not his fault. First of all, the Jaguars were already in on Blaine Gabbert, so like they weren't even looking at Russell Wilson. Second of all, he was pretty good. Anger was a good punter. And third, he had a great nickname, Banger. So like, what's not to like? And then we go back to, I want to say 95, where the Bears took punter with the 56th overall pick. I think his name was Todd Sauerbrunn.
Yep.
And Sauerbrunn made a Pro Bowl with him. He made a couple other Pro Bowls with Carolina. He was good. I don't know if he was 56th overall pick good, but he was good. And then there's the gold standard for punters with high picks, a guy named Ray Guy, taken, I believe, in the 1972 or 73 draft by the Oakland Raiders with the 23rd overall pick. Every major punting award is named after him, and with good reason. He was awesome. Epic hang time. In college, he made his last year, he made a 61-yard field goal, and I think a 93-yard punt. Like the guy, as punters go, he was a super freak. He was amazing, and like he's in the Hall of Fame. He's the only punter in the Hall of Fame, but he legit belongs in the Hall of Fame. He won games. Like flipping the field back in the day when offense wasn't as good as it was. There were field position battles, and in a field position battle, he was the trump card.
Yeah, and I'm reading that I just looked up Ray Guy as you were talking about him, and like this is like perfect like Raiders. This is like so Raiders, just given our knowledge of them drafting Janikowski, but they drafted him in the first round. Guy in the first round, so that's kind of fitting. Just that.
Hey, look, Seabass is a pretty good kicker as kickers go. He had great range. Was he worth a first round pick? Maybe not, but he was Seabass. He was cool. He was what they thought they were getting. So like if they weren't happy with the pick, that's on them and not on him. Yeah. So I have no problem with Ariza going day 2. He's a really, really good punter. Like his average over his college career was like 51.1 yards. The dude's got game.
And was there any more about punters that you? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you about Ray Guy, but I just had to.
No, I mean, not just there's a punter who is worth a day 2 pick, and it's the first time since I've been doing actually reviews and rankings. Like I wasn't doing rankings in Sauerbrunn Day, and I don't know where I would have put him, but Ariza's in my day 2. I think he belongs on day 2, which is pretty cool and pretty rare. But let's actually, if you don't mind, you want to switch gears to Deebo now?
Oh yeah, we could discuss that before listener questions. So You were. Yeah, this was one of our pre-discussions, and I didn't actually have this on the outline, but like the whole reason I was like kind of not as interested about the draft this year, I had mentioned at the beginning, was about the fact that the Niners don't really have a pick. But the more that I hear about Deebo, makes me think that there's a chance that he could get traded before Thursday, or maybe even on Thursday. And um, I was telling you before, I don't know how the average person on Twitter here is like, but as far as I've gone, I feel like my fandom has been a little more, not say on the downslope, but I've become more realistic about how sports are handled. And I know that there's a business aspect of sports that we don't really want to acknowledge. We try to ignore it because we're fans, because we're fanatics, because we're idiots for our teams. But as far as if they're gonna if Deebo wants to leave, I want them to trade him in the next 2 days. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Next 3 days, because I would like I saw what the Chiefs got for Hill, and I don't know if that's like realistic in terms of what I think the Niners should get, but I do feel like Deebo had a much bigger impact than I could even give him credit for last year.
So Deebo made an impact. He was both your best running back by far and your best receiver.
Yeah.
So what's an impact?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't really know if anybody really knows why he wants to leave. Like I feel like it's purely speculation.
I think it comes down to he's seeing what other elite wide receivers are getting.
Yeah.
He rightly views himself as a lead at this point. I don't, you know what? Hold on one second. I really do need to look up like how many years he has left on his contract.
I think it's one more. I think it's one more year, but I'm not entirely sure.
So let me.
But
I'm gonna.
While you discuss that, like I had seen somebody, and I don't remember who had pointed this out, but somebody said that Trent Baalke ruined the wide receiver market with his Kirk deal. Now I don't know how much you believe in that, or if the deals would have just
any single deal can be viewed as an outlier. Any single deal can just be like, that's what they did, you're not getting that. But when it gets repeated a couple times, then it resets the market. That's where you are.
So like, when I saw Kirk's deal, I think everyone kind of saw Kirk's deal and they were like, well, he's not worth that, but one team thinks he is. And then like, that raised an eyebrow with Devontae Adams, and
So that's the thing. There's been multiple wide receivers with getting huge deals this offseason. That's what it comes down to.
So, and I get that. So, you're gonna have to pay up, because like in terms of your positional value, like with if you're just looking on the offensive side of the ball, would you put like an elite wide receiver as like the number 2 or number 3 priority? Like would you put like left tackle?
Is obviously number 1. So if I could choose between an elite wide receiver or elite offensive tackle, I'm gonna take the elite wide receiver.
Okay. So arguably, especially with the Niners, they're transitioning to a new quarterback. There was some speculation that maybe he was kind of attached to Jimmy, but I'm not necessarily buying that. Although, I mean, he did do well with Jimmy this year. I'm
sure he'd be happy to work with the new guy so long as he gets paid. I think this is all money.
Yeah, and the thing is, that's what I'm, and that's the thing. Like I have to remember to try and decipher through the bullshit. That's what we have to remember at this time of the year. Even stuff that's not related to the draft, we have to remember that there's always bullshit in the air.
Yes.
And that like you can easily breathe it in, and and then you kind of get like, a headache or a head cold. But because every indication is that he wants to leave, but like, if it, most of the time it is about money. Most of the time, I can't say all the time, because sometimes guys just don't like the team they're on. I didn't see anything before this year that indicated that Deebo was, unhappy with the Niners. So I feel like if they did offer him, um, a top 3-4 salary, that he would probably stay. If I'm thinking about it rationally.
So, like, again, I don't know what the numbers would be, but for some definition of paid, he'd be happy, and he'd be happy to stay.
Yeah. Especially, the more guaranteed money you throw at him, the better. But,
Yeah.
but, and the thing is, like, it goes back to what I was discussing before, like kind of my realization in the past, 15, 20 years. You got quarterback, you got the starter who's going to be Lance. Let's just say Lance, because even Jimmy's acknowledging that it's going to be Lance. You got him in his second year out of 5, and this is the window where you could spend money on other positions. So this is when you got to do it, and maybe that's why the Chiefs, traded Hill, because Mahomes is past that point now. So I say, I hope they sign him, but if they're not, I hope they trade him in the next couple days. If they're not if they're not going to trade him in the next 2 or 3 days, if he's not on our team after starting in September, I'll be very upset if we didn't like get anything like from this year's draft. But again, I don't know if next year's draft's any better, but
well, every draft is box chocolates, so who the hell knows? I'm sure that if they want to trade him, they want to trade him now. I don't know that they want to trade him because they have him for one more year, cross-controlled, and then after that, there are various tenders that they could offer him, where they get picks back if he signs elsewhere. Like, it's unclear if they're going to trade him, but they might. I don't know. That's entirely something that up to them. Now, I'm curious about one thing. I'm looking at Jimmy G's contract. He's got a salary of $24 million this year. Is he tradable? Have teams been talking to them? I have no idea if Jimmy G has trade value.
Well, the thing that scares me is that, that there was like a trader that there was at least one team interested in Wentz, given that everything we've seen about Wentz, but there's, nobody interested in Jimmy now. Is that because of the surgery he just had? Is that because of his contract? I don't really know.
Could be either, could be both.
I mean, teams who've certainly seen enough of Jimmy to know that, like, he's not, he's not the guy that's gonna win you a game. He can help supplement your team if they have other people around him that are
in the Super Bowl in that one game and didn't take any of them.
Like, the fact that we were up, the fact that we were, winning in the fourth quarter against Mahomes, kind of, if you would have told me that at the beginning of that season that you'd be in the Super Bowl, you'd be up by 10 points in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
And like, you don't know the end result. Like, I would gladly take that. Given that our quarterback was Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yep.
But he's not the reason that they were there. He wasn't, I will give him credit. Like, I was very down on the choice to start him in week 18 because of the extra game. Week 18, when he was coming back from the injury, and there was some just awful passes that he was throwing. But they came back in that second half to preserve the playoff spot, and they obviously made that run, which, hey, they were really close to making another Super Bowl with him. So,
Yep.
I can't knock what, like, you can't knock the results. Like, anyone who wants to argue the results for Jimmy, like, I can't argue against it, because he's had a great run with the Niners. But if you're looking at the skill level of him versus other quarterbacks, he's not the guy who you'd want when you're down by, like, 10 points entering the second half. Typically, like that one particular day in week 18, yeah, he was, they played really well in the second half that week, and they beat the Rams, and then they lost the Rams, but they still made the playoffs. So, that was a fun run. But like I said, that's not the guy I want to lean on. And I don't really know. I don't really know how they're going to get rid of him. I don't know if he's going to just end up getting released, like, or if they're going to have to, like, get rid of, or if they're going to, have to pull some kind of deal with, like, when you get these quarterbacks, like I remember, like, the Whedon deal or something like that, where the team that trades for Whedon ends up getting more than the team, just to try and
Yeah.
get rid of him. So, like, I don't know. I feel like they're gonna have to eat some salary. I don't know, but
We will have to wait and see. But yes, like, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes.
but yeah, I don't see. I feel like it'd be better for all parties involved if he was traded, but
Sure.
it wouldn't be the worst thing, as long as everyone kind of, to use the Rocks line, if everyone knows their role, and, like, you don't trade as many picks as the Niners did to sit Lance for a second year. So
No, sitting him for 1 year, yeah, everyone expected that. Sitting him for 2 years, no
yeah,
one expected that.
that's a little excessive for the amount of capital that they gave up. So
Hold on a second. We have a quote from the 49ers GM, John Lynch. Can't ever imagine wanting to move on from Deebo Samuel. So there you go.
So, I think they'll try. I think they'll do their best to, keep him around. Maybe I'm a little more optimistic now after we start talking through it than I was beforehand. Just because, the whole idea of him just being, mad at the Niners, like, normally you could find a reason for a guy being mad at a team, like maybe he just hates the coach or hates the quarterback or hates something, but, like, I never got the impression he's overplayed his contract. He wants to get paid. So that part makes more sense to me than any other possible aspect, just based on what I know about him. But obviously I don't, I'm not behind the scenes, so I'm only guessing.
Yeah, we all are.
So, okay. I think I exhausted my Deebo
Sure, but I'm glad
lungs there.
that.
So we did have some listener questions here. One was from Dylan M1002. He was saying, been seeing GM/coaches on different timelines, and this is obviously Gettleman last year. Gettleman in year 3 win now versus win now mode to save his ass, while Judge was starting fresh year 1 with maybe different motivations. Do you find this to be a real thing? Can you quantify it? Or do you subjectively factor it in?
So when it comes to general managers, imagine 32 general managers, they're all sitting at a poker table. And different managers are aware of what the other managers are going through, what the situation they're in. And if they're on the hot seat, if they need to win now, if they need to do something flashy, say, hey, got a high pick here. What's it worth to you? And so, yeah, I mean, when there's the fish grass guessing for the poker table, yeah, I got what you need. Let's talk. So yes, other teams are absolutely aware of it. When Bill O'Brien was GM effectively, or no, actual GM of the Texans, Man, his number was on your speed dial, and you loved it when he called you. You took that call.
Yeah, yeah. You had a special ringer music for him on your cell phone. You had, or maybe a burner that just specifically for the Bill O'Brien burner.
Yeah. Only one person has this number, and I always answer it when he calls.
So yeah, and and I think back to just the Bears and how how shocking it is to me that Ryan Pace was allowed to pick a second franchise quarterback after the first one, after the results of the first one, like because most guys get
you get one shot.
They get one shot at that pick, and if they fuck it up, then that's it. But he actually got a second shot, and like I'm not, obviously, the Bears had other problems besides Fields last year, but like just the fact that he had even a chance to pick a second one is actually kind of surprising, thinking of this logic that that like well, I guess last year they were still playing with the same coach as well, but well, yeah, it's but yeah, I guess his first year Pace was playing with John Fox, and Fox got fired the next year, if I recall correctly.
I'm not going to be correct you. I don't remember who the coach was.
But yeah, normally I feel like it seems like it makes the most sense to have like the GM and the coach on similar timelines, I guess. Probably like for business purposes and like I don't know.
Well, just remember, I mean, the GM is the boss.
Yeah.
Like coach can be whatever timeline he's on. GM's the boss, and the owner is the real boss. So and that's the longest timeline imaginable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like I know, like when I think of the Niners, like if I'm thinking that Shanahan and Lynch are kind of attached to the hip. So like if there's ever a point in time where they're thinking about getting rid of one of the guys, they're probably thinking about getting rid of the other guy too, is kind of what I'm thinking. And that's probably the case with most GMs and coaches.
Yeah.
So, okay. So the next question here was from Red Sox M Texas. I guess he was asking about I think he was asking about your methodology in terms of the draft, and I think you had pointed him to the fact that you've done the draft, I think, for the past 8 years, I think.
Maybe so the last 8 years I'm on. I've definitely been doing it longer than that, but I didn't have the WordPress site before then.
Okay.
But so he's at one of those questions he asked me is age of variable, and it hasn't really been. I've mentioned it and I've noticed it in a few cases with some quarterbacks, whatever else. But I'm going to have to do the actual research and see how much it matters and if it matters and if I can quantify how much it matters. Is it the kind of thing where it doesn't really matter if you're like 20 or 21 or else, but if you're like 23, then we have to add a 30% bust penalty or whatever it is. But that's going to be in the data. And I don't know the data. I haven't researched the data. But it's the next thing that when I find the time, I want to look into and see how much it matters. And it may be something that my next year's grades will reflect. Next year, my grades might have a penalty for being older, or at least not succeeding until you're older. I don't know. Until I do the work, I won't know what it's going to be. But that's one of the things I'm going to look into.
Yeah, no, I guess a part of this era too with age is that I'm trying to remember what kind of what kind of things that the NCAA has allowed, like in terms of letting guys stay an extra year or two because of COVID.
So the COVID thing changed things, and so this year is a bit of an anomaly in that respect. So we have to let a few things slide right now.
Yeah, and yeah, I feel like that's something that it's probably I don't know how difficult that'll be for you to weigh and consider when you're coming up with these potential age.
Well, thankfully, when I'm doing the research, this year is going to be incomplete.
Okay.
So like I'm going to be probably looking for the last 10 or 12 years or so before this
Okay.
year.
That makes sense. Yeah, you want to have a larger data set.
Yeah.
Okay, and then to end, well, we might end it on something else, but in terms of the listener questions, it's nice to always end it on a lighter note here. So Sizzle asked teams that are most likely to serve or cater meatloaf in the war room.
So meatloaf itself as a dish has a fairly strong foothold in the state of Pennsylvania, which narrows it down to Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Between the two of them, I would lean Pittsburgh for meatloaf, but you can
Okay.
go either way.
Okay. Okay. And I always appreciate those kind of questions on these
Oh yeah, absolutely.
lighthearted content. Never hurt anyone.
Nope.
So yeah, I think I think I added everything that was added kind of last second. Was there anything else that we didn't touch base on that you want to bring up?
One thing. And again, I know this is a gambling podcast, so I don't feel too bad, but again, anti-gambling, please don't gamble, people. I'm just looking at two players. I see Malik Willis. His draft position is over under 13 and a half, over plus 100, under minus 130. And I will tell you, I expect if he's available at 9 and 10, teams to get itchy trigger fingers to trade up and go grab him. So I would be surprised if he's there at 14, which would be the overcashing. I'm expecting the under the cash there. Just because even if the teams already in those spots don't necessarily want or need a quarterback or want Willis, someone's going to make a phone call. And then right next to him, there's the wide receiver most likely to go first, Garrett Wilson, under 9.5. The thing that makes me happy there is if he's gone at 9, it means New York can't take him at 10. So that's great. Unless he goes 7, in which case that wasn't great. So yeah, that's how the draft can go sideways for the New York teams.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Like I said, I guess we'll see in the next couple of days how interested I am in the draft. Like I said, my interest in the draft, I'm still interested, but I'll be more interested if the Niners end up trading Deebo, because that means that we're going to have to find another wide receiver one, or I don't even know what to call his position, because it's like a new hybrid.
He's unique.
Like
There's no one else in the NFL who is comparable to him in terms of his value, in terms of both wide receiver and running back.
Yeah, because he was, like you said, he was the best running back and best wide receiver on the team. So, I'll be disappointed if he leaves, but if they do, if he is going to leave, I want to maximize the value of what we can get for him, I guess.
Totally understand.
Kind of where I'm getting at. So, just because I'm in the mood to do it, I'm just gonna do one more cheers to everything here. And everyone, thanks again for listening. And I appreciate everyone and their support when I mentioned everything about the little boy passing away into the kitty heaven 3 months ago. So, still, think about that. And it's, it was an honor to have such a good pet. And I always recommend, like I said, to, just love your pets and just love every moment you have with them. And just live every day, and just to hug your pets, kiss your pets, whatever it is you do with them, just keep doing it. So so Seth, once again, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Everyone, once again, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. And I guess we'll say the next time we'll probably talk in this form will be probably in September. So and might have some stuff in between them, but as far as you go, Seth, we'll probably talk to you again in September for an NFL preview, and we'll go from there. So,
all right.
So thanks again, and everyone, thanks for listening. Once again, take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.